You have to figure out some things that you're interested in and actually build. If you just rely on, oh, I'm just going to go to work and I'll do whatever task they assign me and then just limit it on that, you will never get the proficiency that you need. My name is Vincent. I'm 42 years old, from the US, East Coast, around New York. I have two businesses right now, both in financial technology. One is called QVest. We're a cryptocurrency decentralized finance project. We are trying to make it easier for people to invest by offering downside protection for new investors. And it's a fairly technical explanation to get into the technology, so I'll just gloss over it. But it basically means is so you don't have to take losses, essentially, and that there's some caveats to that. But I invite other people to take a look at qvest.com.
And leading up to your journey, how did you get to this point? So from your 20s onwards, what did you study? What were some of your first jobs? What career did you have in the lead up to doing what you're doing now?
So my career was actually very focused. I started playing around with computers at around 10 years old. And I realized before I got into high school that I was going to be a programmer. I wanted to build video games, and then it didn't turn out that way. My junior year in college, undergrad, I discovered trading, and I made some trades. I decided I really liked it. And then from that point on, I just went into hedge funds.
So you said you discovered it at college?
Yeah.
How did you come across that discovery?
At my school, we had to do what's called an application sequence, which is like a miniature minor, completely unrelated to your field. I just picked finance. I didn't know anything about it. I just said, why not? And then I went to an investing club. It was actually a finance club, and they were talking about investment. They talked about some trading, and I just decided to try it out. So I opened a trading account. I believe it was Scott Trade or Share Builder, one of those old ones. And I made some trades in DNA, which is Genentech. It happened to work. I didn't really know what I was doing, and I was like, oh, I just made like $2,000, $3,000 without really trying that hard. This is great. And then from that point on, that's when I started learning more.
So then it became a passion, it sounds like, or an interesting topic that you wanted to keep pursuing. So then you've discovered that in college. You've got this technical background in computer programming, coding. Now you've got this interest in finance. Post-college, where did that lead you?
Yeah, so it was actually kind of fortunate circumstance, maybe, because at that time, automated trading had not really begun yet. And so when I was finding jobs, I was trying to find a job as a trader, which you're sitting in front of a computer, like clicking on things. You're not actually programming or whatnot. And my first couple of jobs were like that. But as the industry evolved, algo trading became more and more prominent. And then these manual traders, they started dying out, and they were getting replaced by computer programs. And in the firms I was working at, I was like one of the few people who knew how to write programs. So they were like, well, we need to automate the strategy. How do we do it? And I was like, okay, well, this is how you would do it. And then it kind of went from there. And then my career just kind of moved in that automation direction. It's like, okay, I'm no longer manually trading. I'm now building models, programming infrastructure, getting the trades to go.
And while you were doing this, did you continue studying? Did you teach yourself more things? Because it would have been tricky if this was a emerging field. I mean, I mentioned this before. I've read, Jim Simons, the man who solved the market. Is this something you slowly taught yourself as more opportunities came, or you taught yourself on the job?
It's kind of both. The programming side of things is not that difficult, but it's more the mathematics. Like as a software engineer, you get a certain amount of mathematics. It's good, but for trading, you need a lot of statistics, and I didn't have a very strong background in that. So that I had to, I learned some, but that I had to study a lot of that on my own.
Right.
And then there's a lot of, as the field has gotten more sophisticated, people are now like exploring like neural networks and like a lot of like formal machine learning. And I wasn't trained in any of that. So I had to pick that up over time also.
Where do you think this curiosity or desire to keep learning has come from?
For me, if we're quite honest, it's maybe greed. people go into trading because they want to become rich and or whatnot. For me, I realized I want to be independent. So, in order to be independent, I need to control everything. When I say control everything means, if I'm going to come up with a trading strategy, I need to be able to handle every aspect of it. So I need to be able to come up with a model. I need to be able to implement the model. I need to be able to execute the trades. I need to be able to see what's going on, right? I need to build everything by myself if I want to do this. And realizing that I had gaps made me keep researching. Well, okay, I'm building this. Like, how do I do this thing? How do I do that thing?
So while you had a focus of like, okay, I wanted to programming, coding, you did also just go in the direction where opportunities were and slowly iterated from there.
I mean, yeah, that's kind of the safe approach, right?
Because a lot of people a lot of people ask me questions on, I want to create this business, I want to live this lifestyle. What's this grand plan that I need to do in order to live that lifestyle? And I always say, well, the first thing you need to do is just take the first step, then the second step, and then slowly the path will start illuminating itself. So this iterated approach to learning and even your own careers is not as common, I think, as people think, because they think you need a grand vision and a grand design in order to get to this level of independence and freedom. But seemingly you've
well, okay, it's not that defined. I'm speaking in hindsight. Because I am talking specifically on trading. A lot of people think, oh, you start and 90% of the people fail, but if you're one of that 10%, in 6 months you can get it working, and that's actually not true at all. It takes a long time. For me, but when I was early, like young in my 20s, I didn't know that, right? So I was like, okay, I'm going to build my own trading algo, and then I'm going to just run off and do whatever I want, right? So I started building it, and then 6 months goes by, I have something built, and then I realized, oh, this doesn't cover X, this doesn't cover Y. Well, let's okay, I've already put in this much work. Let's put in a little bit more and get it running, and then it just kept going, right?
You mentioned the value of independence as well in your journey, and with that, obviously, the value of freedom as well. Where do you think that's come from, and when was that moment where you realized I actually really value independence and freedom in my lifestyle?
That was actually not until late. So I'm 42 now, and I came over to Asia about 2 years ago, a little less than that. I probably realized that I wanted freedom rather than wealth at around 35. Because I did an MBA. It's from an Ivy League school, and then most of my peers, they would go for the $500,000 job at some big corporation, where they have to work a lot, but they have a lot of prestige and whatnot, but their life is very like set. And I had no interest in doing that. I was like, okay, I have the ability to do that now, but I don't actually want to do that. So like, what do I actually care about? And then I realized it's just, I want to be able to work on what I want to work on. I don't want somebody else telling me what to do. So I'm willing to give up potential upside in order to claim that.
Was there like a particular moment that this was like a moment of revelation, or was it a gradual accumulation?
It was a gradual accumulation. Like I had started, so I have a quant trading business that I didn't really mention earlier, but I had started that before I went into grad school. And it wasn't really self-sustaining by the time I got out of grad school. And then as I was thinking, okay, well, I still need income. So I started looking to apply for jobs. And that's when I would start asking myself that question, right? Because if you have that qualification, you can fully leverage it and say, okay, I'm going to, in the trading field, I'm going to go for like Renaissance or D. Shaw or one of these very big names where they pay you a lot and you're there. Or I can take a job that will pay the bills and allow me to work on my own thing. And, it'll be humble, right? But like, I still have the freedom. And I kept leaning toward that second answer. I was like, okay, no, maybe it's not just wealth that I'm looking for. It's something else.
What age were you when you finished the MBA?
I started at 32, so I was like around 34, 35. I don't remember exactly at this point.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you finished the MBA around 34, 35. Then you moved to Asia at 40?
At 40, yeah.
So between those 5 years, what were you doing in that time?
I was preparing, actually. So during grad school, I had realized that I wanted to leave the U.S. And my original intent was to go to China because I can speak Chinese, can't read or write, but I figure it's good enough, right? But I was worried about my financial situation, right? Like if I'm living there, how do I make money, right? How much does it cost to live there, right? Like what other things do I need to do? So I actually started studying Chinese really intensely while I was in school to like get my proficiency up so that I could go. And then I was figuring, okay, I'm a U.S. citizen. What kind of state residency do I have to minimize my tax burdens? And so that was the main bulk of the time, right? So I found a job after school. I was trying to build up my savings a little bit, so to give myself some runway. And then I had some family events that held me there a little bit longer. But then after that, I just decided you're going to be prepared as you ever can be, so you may as well just go.
So now I'm going backwards. So I'm trying to piece together the journey. So you've done the MBA at 34. You realized you've got this passion or interest for finance. You're working at this firm. So you were what, 21, 22 working for that firm, or a bit older?
Well, I mean, my first job I would have been 21.
So it's from 21 to 34 when you completed the MBA. What was that 13-year?
I mean, it was roughly approximately 4 to 5 years. I would just move to a different hedge fund essentially. So all proprietary, buy-side proprietary trading, right? But they're like all related industries, like in New York and Chicago.
One of the questions I often get from people wanting to become digital nomads or to move overseas is they often see that their current 9-to-5 job has a liability to living that lifestyle. And I've actually written a lot about it on Medium, saying actually your 9-to-5 job can help you jumpstart your own business or your own thing if you use it correctly, and you can start building it on the side while you have a 9-to-5 job. From your decade or so or more in the finance hedge fund world, how important was that experience and that knowledge to helping you jumpstart what you did after?
I mean, so now we're really talking about entrepreneurship. And for me, it was pivotal. Like a lot of people want to start the entrepreneurship thing at like 25, but you don't know the industry. You don't know the pain points. You don't know the market. So like you don't know what to build, right? And for me, working at those funds, like saying, okay, if I were to build this myself, what do I need, right? Or if I don't have access to all this information, right? Because hedge funds, you get a lot more sophisticated information. Like, how do I compete? How do I invest? Or what disadvantage am I at, right? I had to work all that time to gain the industry knowledge to say, okay, here's a problem that I can solve, right? And that's kind of how KeelVest was born. I've been in the markets for almost 20 years, and I know that people don't have the expertise to invest on their own. And then if they never start, they will never climb on that ladder towards climbing the financial status. So I found out ways to, apply game theory, apply what we know to make it easier. And I wouldn't know that at 25. You have to get the working experience.
So when you were working, were you actively asking yourself these questions, or is it more in hindsight that you realized that you were in fact asking these questions without really realizing it?
No. I did know that I wanted to have my own trading algo and a firm, right? But in terms of I'm going to try to solve a problem for somebody, what? No, I didn't ask any of that. It's just, you just watch, you're learning, and then you realize, oh, here's some problem, and I actually think I can fix it. And then that's kind of the spark that gets things going.
We'll get back to the podcast in 1 minute, but I just wanted to let you know the sponsor of this week's episode, which is me. So I've got a free 5-day email course that will help anyone with a 9-to-5 or a beginner solopreneur start and scale their business to $1,000 per month. So you can find a link in the description in this podcast episode. Click on it. It's free to sign up. You'll get 5 emails from me teaching you and walking you through how to start your one-person business and make your first $1,000 per month recurring. So I'll see you there, and thank you for listening to this episode. So if someone was in a 9 to 5 job where they knew they wanted to go into their own thing at some point, whether it's related to their 9 to 5 job or not, you mentioned some questions that you asked yourself. How would you do this for yourself? How would you bridge that information asymmetry? How would you add value? What are some other questions that you think you were asking yourself either implicitly or explicitly during that time to help you start the business you have now?
I wouldn't even be as methodical as that, right? A lot of kind of what drove me into building these things on my own was really just talking to my friends who are not in finance. And they were like, hey, Vince, what do I do? Right. And I was like, well, okay, like I can tell you what to do. I can tell you how to read a chart and all that. Right. But if there was, and then I started thinking, well, if there was this thing that did this, then I could just send it to you. Right. Then that would solve a lot of problems. Right. So, I'm, there's not a methodical sort of response to that. It's more just observe and see what people are missing, right? Or see what would make your life easier when you're trying to help your friends.
Yeah. So I think the easiest way is like just talk to potential customers.
Yeah.
Real people who have a real problem when it comes to finance, things that you have figured out for yourself and find very easy, or knowledge that you find easy to grasp, but for the average person, such as your friends or family, they find that difficult.
Yeah, and that's actually a good point, because one of the things I realize is for me, if I can build it, my instinct is, well, then anybody can do it. So it's not really worth anything. But the reality is that there's a lot of things that you can do that other people have no idea how to do. And you can just, even if they could do it on their own, it would take them a long time to figure it out. So, they'll pay you the whatever just to like do it for them in 5 minutes so they don't have to think about it.
I think one of the traps that I see a lot of people fall into is that they think they need to have this killer idea that has to be so new, so innovative that no one's thought about it before, where actually you just need to solve a very painful small problem for a group of people that you find that you've already solved for yourself or many others like yourself. Mm-hmm. And how I tell people to leverage their 9 to 5 is you are constantly you're already selling a product. It's just not yours. So if you're going to improve on this product, like you mentioned before, how would you do it better for maybe a different group of people, or a larger group of people? So, I mean, your experience of just talking to your friends and family, I think it's an easy place for a lot of people to start.
Yeah, I mean, for me, yeah. I like when you think about my friends are like, okay, they're also basically customers, right? Yeah.
Was there any decisive moments in your career that really shaped your life or your business?
I mean, there's kind of lots of maybe little moments, and I haven't honestly thought about this that much, right? But I mentioned how I was a computer science person purely, and then I got into trading by just haphazardly making trades, right? That's kind of a pivotal moment, because I went from pure computer science to, oh, now I'm going to be a finance guy. That's kind of one of them. Kind of skipping forward quite a bit. Most of my career, I think, was very pointed from that point on. And then the next pivot was the sort of grad school, realizing like when I started applying for jobs afterwards, I just didn't really care for these high prestige jobs. I wanted the freedom type job. And then about 3 years ago, so this is kind of like one of the catalysts. My mother passed away. And she had known about my plans to like go, but I hadn't gone, right? And then I realized when she passed out relatively young from a very like fast acting cancer, right? It was kind of surprise. And it's like, well, okay, life is limited, right? If you spend the whole time planning, you might not get to execute on that plan. So I figured at that point, okay, whatever preparation I have is good enough. I'm just going to go.
That move to Asia, you said you've been planning it for a couple of years. The passing of your mother was the catalyst to really get it going. I always say that I try to make decisions when I've got like 51% of the information I need to make a choice. If you were to distill yours down into a percentage, how much in terms of how much information did you have to be able to act that this could work?
I'm probably closer to 75-80%.
Yeah.
Because like what I had done before I left was, I was living in New York. I decided to move to Texas, where I had a friend, changed my residency. I stayed there for a year, and got the ID and everything, and got the forwarding address. So like, I was very well prepared. and I had done a lot of research. I followed you basically YouTubers who live here and say, oh, I live here, and I figured out the cost of living. I did exact comparison analysis versus my cost of living in New York. And I even did research on, well, if I get a job there, working as a local there, what is my income? And then how do I survive on that? And then, obviously, I'm an American. The best thing is to actually take the American income and move it out there. But I was thinking, okay, well, what if I can't do that? What is my contingency there? So I did a lot of this research. And the only thing I had not answered was, okay, what is my job alternative? But then I went anyway. And then I figured out some things on my own after that.
And how long have you now been in Vietnam?
Vietnam, just short of 2 years.
Yeah. So now that you've been here for 2 years, was there anything you felt that you either missed or you over-prepared for?
I definitely over-prepared for the cost of living because I basically said, okay, I need like a year and a half, 2 years worth of savings before I even get out there. And that 2 years becomes like 4 years out here. So it's like, okay, like I really I could have gone a little bit earlier. Yeah. And life is not as stressful. I mean, okay, maybe the first month or two, because you don't know how to bargain, you don't know what to look for, you pay more, right? But now, like, if you shop around a little bit for the apartments, you can get a relatively good deal, even if you're paying like expat rates. You're still cheaper than back in the U.S. Even if you eat food like expat food, you're still much cheaper than the U.S. So you don't have to live like a local, but you still realize the economic benefit.
And was there anything you thought you missed?
Which you would think I would have considered was actually the degree of culture shock and integration with locals. I mean, everyone expects it, but you'll actually experience it to different degrees depending on where you go. So I started out in Thailand. I visited Taiwan. I'm ethnically Chinese, right? So I spent a little bit of time in China. I visited Japan a whole bunch of times also. And those all actually, primarily English speaking, all those will actually, they have their little idiosyncrasies. And if you don't really expect it, you'll find yourself, okay, after a month or two, like, oh, this is not what I expected, and it'll drag you down a little bit. So I experienced that a little bit in Thailand because it's a little bit of a different culture. I did not really experience it here. I found it much easier for me to make friends here and to socialize, even though I only speak English here. Right?
Is that because you expected it? Because you kind of experienced it in Thailand and then you came here?
No, I didn't realize it until after the fact. I spent a month in Thailand. I was like, oh, okay, this is good. I made some friends there, but they were mostly expats. Like in the crypto space, so English speaking, not the locals. And then I was here, and then I liked it. After a month, I was like, I'll stay a couple extra months. And then around 6 months, I realized that I had not experienced what I experienced in Thailand, even though I had been in Vietnam for already 6 months. So I was like, okay, there's something going on here.
With that transition, you moved from the US to Asia and then settled in Vietnam. How did you handle fear, judgment, and expectations of others?
That's not really been a high concern of mine, to be honest. Yeah, I'm not one to be really afraid because, well, okay, I prepare, right? I know what I'm getting myself into. So what is there to be afraid of, right? Like you mentioned 51%, I'm like sitting at 80%. Like I know most of the answers already, right? I mean, doubt, right? Like, as opposed to fear. I mean, 80% of the information, like it's a calculated risk, right? I can handle the remaining 20% that I'm uncertain of, right? Like I'm an adult, right? And then judgments of others. Fortunately for me, I had talked with my parents for quite a while. They knew I wasn't really satisfied living in the U.S. So they approved of me trying something different. So I had my mother's buy-in before she passed. I had my dad's buy-in. And then afterwards, I sat down and I was like, okay, I think it's time for me to go. I had a family discussion. We were a very tight family with my brother and my sister and all that. And then they said, yeah, go. So not a problem.
What advice would you give yourself when trying to integrate or assimilate into a new culture, knowing what you know now?
Well, I mean, I'm already executing on this. Wherever you go, make an effort to learn the local language. Like one, it's just respectful. It's respectful to the culture to like, if you're going to be there, like figure out what they're saying. Right. And two it's useful because, when you can speak even a little bit, people will feel a little bit more comfortable with you. So you're a little less likely to get scammed or, and so on and so forth. And people are more likely to do you favors.
What did you value 5 years ago or even 10 years ago that you no longer value or value much less today?
I mean, we kind of already talked about, right? Because 5 years ago was like around, still like a little bit out of grad school. And that was my shift for freedom over wealth. Like I had a burning ambition as a child to like, I'm going to be like a millionaire by 30. And that didn't happen. And I was like, okay, you're 35, right? And then it kind of kept going up. But then, by the time I was positioned to actually accomplish something like that, it's like, I don't actually want that money. I just want to be able to do what I want to do.
Looking back on your entrepreneurship journey, what do you think are the most valuable skills you learned besides the technical skills that also helped you in your business, but also becoming a digital nomad or living overseas?
Besides technical?
Besides technical.
Well, when you say besides technical, okay, so technical, I'm just going to very strictly define it as computer skills.
Yeah.
Right. The other things that come are the willingness to take risks, the ability to calculate risks when you have limited information. Right. It's like, okay, there's a 41% chance that I don't know what happens. There's 50 whatever chance that it does work in my favor, and if so, what? If so, that am I willing to do this? All right. That's very useful. And then accounting, but not formalized accounting, but like more like budgeting. Okay, because I don't know what the next 6 months will look like. How much do I expect to spend? What is the upper bound of what I will spend? And I'll save 8 months or 10 months. All right, and then by the time 4 months is in, okay, has anything changed? If then nothing has changed, okay, that's an indication I have 4 months left, and I should start lining up the next solution. Because, when you're doing entrepreneurship or nomading or whatever you want to call it, you're dealing with a lot of uncertainty, and you have to be comfortable with that uncertainty.
In the elevator coming into this room, we're chatting about your day and you're talking about AI. What are some emerging trends and technologies, you can talk about AI, that you're particularly excited about, that you think is going to change your industry?
Well, I can tell you that I use the large language models, LLMs, on a daily basis. I'm probably interacting with either ChatGPT or Claude AI at least 4 to 6 hours out of it every day. And that is to supplement my programming. That is going to become a deeper and deeper trend. I might be biased because I'm a senior engineer and I am a programmer. I do not think these AI models will replace skilled individuals, but newbie individuals, right, like fresh engineers or people who do maybe a less skilled job, they're going to be in trouble. And that is kind of the trend that people will have to figure out how to deal with. The best thing to do is really to position yourself such that as the AI gets more advanced, you benefit more rather than trying to compete with it. So you want a symbiotic relationship. Right now, I am in such a position, right, because I can take the AI and multiply my productivity by 20, but the AIs at this point are not at a level where they can replace someone like me.
Just say you're talking to maybe a 25 to 30-year-old who's maybe teetering on the senior engineer, less skilled engineer. What advice would you give them to get them to the point where they could have that symbiotic relationship with AI?
You have to build projects. I'm going to speak specifically to software engineering types, like data analyst types. You have to figure out some things that you're interested in and actually build them. If you just rely on, I'm just going to go to work and I'll do whatever task they assign me and then just limit it at that, you will never get the proficiency that you need. You might get to a level where you can do a certain thing and you can't be replaced for that little thing. But when it comes to other aspects of software engineering that the AI cannot do, you will also not be able to do it. And then you're stuck. Right?
On the lines of people needing to adapt to AI becoming more and more part of daily working life, are there any other future of work trends that you think people are not seeing?
I don't know about not seeing. I do know that, corporate America, speaking from an American-centric point of view, right, or just really corporate society in more broadly, are very anti-remote work. Are very let's all go to the office so I can stare at you. And honestly, that's not that productive. right? I've realized that I'm the most productive when I sit in a corner and I don't talk to anybody, right? And you don't get that in an office. So you got to go in an office and everybody's bothering you every 5 minutes, right? Um, but that extends, like me being in a corner. I don't have to be in a corner in some office in New York. I can be in here in Vietnam. I can be in a coffee shop. I could travel to Japan. As long as I have an internet connection that will get me into the relevant server and the ability to test code, I can do all my work, right? And I will probably be more efficient because I can set my own hours and I not have it like occupied with meetings and that kind of thing, right? Um, so I actually do think that just from an efficiency perspective, more independent work is going to become more and more prominent. And kind of with that, um, you have the rise of this like kind of nomadic movement. And that's also coinciding with kind of the growth towards contracted, uh, like engagement based work, right? It's no longer about careers and the 9 to 5, right? Uh, Certainly that will still exist, but it's no longer going to be the optimal path. You might have more financial benefit actually by being independent in the future.
How can someone prepare for that future?
You need to be a subject matter expert. I mean, just like entrepreneurship, you find a problem that people haven't figured out and you solve it for them. If you're going to take a work perspective, you find something that you're able to do that other people don't know how to do, and you just drill into that. Being a generalist, that's useful if you're like trying to run the business or build a new product. But if you want to take that kind of contracting approach, then you need to specialize in one thing.
And combining what you said before with needing to build a project and then needing to develop some level of specialty, is there a way that you've combined that into some of your passion projects?
Yes, for me, I specialize in finance, right? So I'm all about quantitative trading. I do machine learning as it pertains to price prediction. Like all my knowledge is about time series and like the intricacies of equities and cryptocurrencies and whatnot, right? So I am very narrowly focused on that. And I don't really bother with the other, like machine learning is a very big field. I can't learn everything, right? I just focus on like shallow machine learning that focus on time series prediction. I'm not trying to like find the cure for cancer, right? Like I'm not doing image recognition, right? These are all things that like you have to be interested in it. But if you're interested, then you just got deep.
Along those lines of thinking back to the start of your entrepreneurship journey and where you are now, what would you do different, if anything?
So I have a tendency to, and I still have this tendency, is to sit in a corner and build. And when you do that, you don't actually know if what you're building is useful, or if it's overkill. Right? So what I would suggest to my younger self is show what you're doing to a lot more people, right? Even if you're unhappy with it, take the perspective of, okay, I've built this thing. It's kind of half-assed, right? Um, Bring it to your friends and say, like, what can I do better? Like, what would make you use this, right? Um, Sometimes you'll get the response of like, well, it's very ugly. It's like, I don't know what all these numbers are, right? Sometimes you'll get that, or other times you'll be like, oh, this is great. Why didn't you show me this a year ago, right? So it's really, I'm an introvert, so I would only talk to friends, right? But really just get more feedback on what you're doing.
So build a project, have it specialize in something you're interested in, whether it's a big domain or a subdomain of machine learning. And then once you've built something as a project, show it to people.
Yeah.
Whether it's friends or the public.
Yeah.
What role do you think documenting in public on social media could play in doing that?
So social media is, from my perspective, is a way of getting exposure, and it's more for when you're past the initial phases of the product. If you haven't talked to a tight-knit group of people who can give you feedback and you're posting on social media immediately, you may succeed if you're lucky, but you might also just be like basically pissing into the wind, right? Because social media has it's got a viral phenomenon, but things need to have hooks to catch on. And if you release a product that like people aren't interested in yet, you don't have those hooks, and you're spending a lot of time. So I would actually say like it's like rocket launch, right? You have to have the initial phase, which is that close knit group of people who you can trust, who will tell you the truth. And then kind of when you have a little bit of traction there, that's when you take it to social media and start to really drive.
I always think of the diffusion of technology where you got, the early adopters was just like the 2.5%. And then you go I don't know what the next segment is. So early adopters or innovators, and then early adopters, then middle adopters, and then like late adopters.
Yeah.
And thinking back to what you've just said, I realized that I've been cultivating this community of people who I can show this podcast to. They could tell me, hey, your interviewing style is really shit. You need to fix that up before I go and do more. But I think sometimes if you release something too early in the journey on social media, social media can also be a cesspool, which is some people just want to tear you down for the sake of tearing you down. So building that community where you can build a project, develop expertise, and then show it to someone. Yeah, and then build that confidence to keep going.
The thing about like social media is it's a great way to get outreach, but people on the social media services out there, they're not engaged. They don't actually care about you, right? And then some of them are in it for the lulz, right? They're just there to tear down. Yeah, they're there to tear you down if they can, right? So because they're less engaged, they have less of an incentive to help you improve.
What life advice would you have for your 29-year-old self? So beyond business, beyond entrepreneurship, beyond technical skills, is there any broader life advice that you'd have for your younger self?
There's things that I reflect on, but I'm not sure that it's necessarily advice. When I was 29, actually, I move every 10 years, actually. So 29, I moved to New York. And I had been in Chicago and Philadelphia before that. So 39 was moved to Asia, right? But at that time, I was still very much struggling to succeed and to find a stable foundation. And I spent a lot of time holed up, just like building and frankly being somewhat depressed, right? Because you look at everyone else is like going out enjoying life, partying, whatnot, kind of living for today, and you're living for tomorrow. I would say that you should do that to an extent, but you also need to balance it. So rather than 100%, like maybe 70-30, right? Especially if you get into your kind of mid-30s, you need to start to level that off a little bit because you need to live your life.
So are you saying that when you were younger, you wish you kind of just enjoyed the present?
A little bit more.
Rather than always think, oh shit, tomorrow this, tomorrow that, next week this, next week that.
I would impose maybe unnecessary suffering on myself, like living much below my means, like not socializing or not to just focus on business and getting things built. And then to an extent, you need to do that, but you should measure it and don't allow it to be an unlimited task. I mean, this is just something I'm saying as I am now. If you were to ask me this when I was like, frankly, less than 32, I would have been like, you're crazy. This is how I succeed. I'm going to keep doing this.
But in hindsight, you've realized you probably could have succeeded and also enjoyed more of life at that time.
Yeah. There is an aspect that you might not realize. If you are exposed to other people and like enjoy life more, you see more, right? And then you might notice things that you're not noticed that might actually be directly pertinent to whatever you're working on.
Moving to Asia, what opportunities and areas of growth did you see in Southeast Asia or Asia generally that you think is not in the US or Australia or the UK at the moment?
So my reasoning behind Southeast Asia specifically was like more of a calculated economics question. The US is a developed country, right? It just sits there as a developed country. And it's kind of like real estate investing. You don't really want to go for the neighborhood that's already rich because that's only going to grow at a certain rate. If you want to have the maximum opportunity, you go to the next neighborhood over, right? That is going to be rich in X years, right? And for honestly, the story of my life, that was usually China. And that maybe ended 5 years ago, right? China has had its path, and it is basically now a mature economy. And a lot of people, myself included, think that it is now on the trajectory that Japan was in the 90s, um, where they have about 30 years worth of adjustment to this new reality that they have to go through. So they're going to be flat now, right? Um, whether it's worse than that, I don't know. But like at the very least, more or less stagnation. So like, where's the next neighborhood over? Who's going to pick up the slack from the Chinese, right? Well, the Chinese and the Americans are competing now, and a lot of the supply chains are moving to Southeast Asia, right? And then some of the information technology is moving to like India, and maybe South America because of the hours, but also like here to Vietnam, right? They put a lot of effort into the STEM education here. There's a lot of good engineers here, so. Uh, that was driving actually my move to Southeast Asia. I thought, okay, for the next 10 to 15 years, the major growth is going to be Southeast Asia. And then as to where, everywhere has its idiosyncrasies, and you kind of choose what you like the most. For me personally, I think I like Vietnam the most out of the places I've been. But you should go to all the places, spend a month in each one, find out what you like, and then just stay there.
I recently read this book called The Futurization, and it basically dictates exactly what you're saying. And one of the stats that really stood out to me was that of the $30 trillion of value that's going to be created globally, only 1 trillion of that is going to be from the Western world. Most of that trillion is going to be from Southeast Asia, Africa, and also Latin America. And I think that for me was that clicking point of the saturation of growth across the Western world as well as China and also East Asia is pretty much at its limit, and it's still going to grow, but maybe or stagnate and grow increments. But everything here is in Southeast Asia. The other stat that I recently came across was there's about to be 1 billion new internet users across the world, mostly in Africa and Southeast Asia and South Asia. With those two things combined, where do you see potential opportunities for entrepreneurs to fill the void, and where the challenges, where there's opportunity, there's obviously going to be challenges. What do you think of the potential business opportunities that could come out of that?
So honestly, that's a pretty broad field, and like it kind of falls down to like where your specialty is to identify the opportunities, right? So I don't know much about Africa. It's just not a place I had much interest in going to. But they're very rich in commodities, like raw inputs. There is a very good supply of labor there, right? So if you were in the kind of the manufacturing and refinement space, you might be able to see something there, right? There's kind of a similar situation here where the local labor, the wages are relatively low, right? People are relatively skilled. And the inputs are plentiful, right? Water is available everywhere here, right? So if you're into manufacturing and goods trading, you might be able to identify something there. I don't pay much attention to it, so I can't. I just vaguely know that it exists. For me, I'm in the financial space, and I see that people are kind of leapfrogging the traditional banking system here. Like everything's kind of digital wallets, cryptocurrency is still in a gray area, but you see a lot of adoption here. But the wealth is not really there yet, right? There's not a lot of wealth here yet, but there's a lot of people who are interested in using it. And that may open some opportunities, right? You have lending applications, you have your own banking applications, right? Novel financial products. To the extent that you can come up with something that can tap into that market, I think there's opportunity there.
When thinking about your own sense of belonging or identity and connection to a community, what does that mean to you?
I think the belonging is driven by common aspirations. So you need to find a group where they don't have to like look like you or talk like you, though that helps, right? Because that makes it easier for you to understand each other. But they have to be trying to do the same things that you're trying to do. And as long as you can find a group like that, I think you'll be okay. For me here in Vietnam, there's a lot of aspiring business people. There's a lot of Western educated people who are still more comfortable in English. And I predominantly spent my time with those two groups.
I was always overcomplicating this definition of belonging, but that your definition of just common aspirations is such an easy way to define it. It's actually such a beautiful way to define it. And the last thing, is there any other message you want to leave the audience with? Anything you want to tell them about your business?
I would encourage people to visit our website, Kyovest, www.kyovest.com. We are a novel financial product that is lowering the barriers of entry for investing. So if you want to invest, but you don't really know what you're doing and you're afraid of losing money, that's basically what we try to solve. The only thought I would have for anybody who's like considering the whole like nomad thing, have a bias for action. Just go. Make sure you're okay for the next 6 months and then go, and you can figure it out from there.
Hello, friends, and thank you again for listening to this week's episode of the podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard and got value from the podcast, I would love for you to share it with a friend who also wants to start, grow, and scale their solopreneur business or on their own one-person business journey. And if you could like and subscribe, that would be amazing. Thank you so much, and I will see you next time. Bye.